Hey guys, welcome back to Enlightened Turtle. It's your host Kev here. So this is just a quick little update on the next chain of videos that we're going to be doing. I did make a little post through the week, don't know if anyone's seen it. Basically, I've come to the end of doing the Wandleberry videos. There's probably more videos I could do on it, but I think I've made the point. There's a lot more information, like I say, I could detail, but that'll be more in the book. There's no point going through every detail, because it's just a lot of it interconnects, and it's more explanations on the stuff we've already discussed, from the material culture and all this kind of stuff. But there's a lot more ground surveying information and, like I say, more technical stuff, which is, like I say, it's kind of long and drawn out when it comes to talking and discussing it, and a lot of the information can get lost because it gets a bit boring. So I'm kind of going to put that to bed, leave that where it is, and we're going to be focusing now on the Aegean. And the Dorians are a discussion that has taken place before on the channel, where we outlined this Dorian migration or expansion, whether they originated in the Peloponnese, was it on Crete, were they Greek in the sense of were they the same as the Aeolic, Ionian, and I always forget the fourth one, but the four factions of the Greek dialects, were they all one and the same? Well, fascinating in the research that I've been doing is it's relating to the Sea Peoples. Now, this is something I never really thought too much about. When I'd heard of the Trojan War and the 1,000 ships, one of the things I had thought about in relation to the Sea Peoples was, well, there's obviously a massive naval force. What happened to this naval force after the Trojan War? Because we don't see no record of it. We don't see no mass movement in the Greek literature. So I kind of thought, well, maybe they were the Sea Peoples and maybe they just expanded outwards after the Trojan conflict. However, when you follow on from the Iliad into the Odyssey, obviously it focuses more on Odysseus and his journey, trials and tribulations and stuff. But we do get, there's peripheral information, and a number of other chroniclers did write about it as well, where we have Agamemnon returning back to Argos only to be killed by his wife. There's all these kind of different bits and bobs of information on that. But as I've been moving through this research, and as I say, I'm kind of learning on the job. I haven't spent 5 years in university studying history. I haven't got a circle around me where we discuss and share ideas. I do communicate with a number of people, and if anyone's watching this, you know who you are. And we discuss topics, quite broad really. But there's the research is kind of taking me into this Sea Peoples, because there's an issue with the chronology, and we all know there's an issue with the chronology. And as I've mentioned in the past, this conflict potentially taking place around 700 BCE instead of 1100, 1200 BCE. Now, I have mentioned that I don't believe that there could be a gap in the chronology in one instance that large. I just don't believe it. I think the gaps in the chronology is more whitewashing, personally, of certain parts of history, certain cultures, movements, dynamics, if you will, which we will come on to. But in terms of the Sea Peoples themselves, they arrived in, Libya, the Aegean, Egypt, the Levant and Anatolia, all at the same time. And around this time is the exact period of which we see the Doritic expansion. And the Doritic expansion just happens to be, oddly enough, in almost all those regions as well. So as I've started to see this crossover, it's taken me a bit more time. I've been reading a lot more published papers rather than the books, just to try and see where modern scholarship has taken this, and see if I can try and fuse it into my beliefs that the Dorians came from the West. And like I say, this next video is going to be pretty solid. Hopefully, I've started putting bits and bobs together. A lot of it's up here at the minute, but you know, like I've said this in the past, I think these things for a long time and then tend to do the edits and the videos like 5% of the time that it's taken to make the video. Really, most of it's thinking about it. And when I was reading, one of the things that I came across was, obviously you've got the Phoenicians, but they are known as the Paliset in the Sea People terminology. But yet, before they became the Phoenicians, they were known as the Philistines to the Hebrews. And in fact, they were actually mentioned in one of the Torahs. And when it comes to making the video, I'll have all the sources and I'll cross-reference and everything will be sweet. But they claim that they came from Kafta. And I have mentioned this in the past. Kafta was the name of Crete, going back to this period of around 1200 BCE. So we're going right back 500, 600, 700 years before classical Greece. And there was another fraction of the Sea Peoples called the Dardanoi, or the Danoi, something like that. I think it was the Danoi actually. And the conflation there in my mind is because you've got the Dardanians and the Danans. So you have a Danoi, which some people believe may relate to one fraction in the Aegean, some to a couple of other places. But out of like the 5 or 6 fractions of the Sea Peoples, you have peoples that came from Sicily and Sardinia. So we've already got somewhat evidence in what I'm saying. Like I say, I will put all this information in the video along with the visuals and all that. And I'm sorry this is a little bit off the cuff, and I've literally just walked in through the door, been away for a couple of days. But the information that these peoples came from the west to the east, as I've theorized, as the Dorians. And I've mentioned, I think I might have touched on it in a previous video as well, that in the back of my mind, I kind of had this thought and this feeling that the Phoenicians and the Dorians must have been connected in some way. One of the reasons is that, you know, apparently it was the phonetical introduction into the Aegean which led to the expansion of the Greek alphabet and what went on to become Greek. And later down the line, when all these dialects merged into one, we got the Chionic Greek, formed by, it was originally formed in Athens because Athens became somewhat of the intellectual epicenter of the Aegean world. It wasn't always the case. Though sorry, I'm getting a lot of ideas confused here. This is why I like to make the videos, and these rambles are a little bit all over the place, so sorry. But this language arrived in the Aegean, probably estimated to be around 900 BC. Well, this is the period when, what you could say, the Doritic influence is in full swing. Now, there's a reading I'm going to do in the next two weeks, hopefully, where we discuss Pythagoras and what the Dorians might have meant to him. And also another thing that ties into that with this Danoi of the Sea Peoples and the Dorians is obviously the Druids. Now, etymological connections is not strong enough. It's quite a weak argument, really. So they were the nucleus of the first ideas that, oh, we've got similar names. And then it came to the timeline. So we had similar times. These people, the Phoenicians, the Dorians, or not so much the Phoenicians, like I say, more so the Philistines and the Paliset, which later became the Phoenicians, who occupied, like Carthage and all these other places. So we've got some etymological connections and some time frame connections laid on top of geographical connections. So I found that quite interesting when I started putting that together. But then how did it tie in to a Western origin of this? Well, if you'd seen that post that I presented where, you have the feathered hats, feathered helmets of the Dorians and the Paliset. Now, I couldn't believe it when I started seeing these connections, to be quite frank, because I can't believe I haven't seen anyone discussing it. So you have the armour that's similar. We have the weaponry that's similar. And we can actually trace it back further west. And one of the things I will go on to discuss, I'm going to say prove them, but don't ever take anything I say as facts. These are just my ideas and what I'm looking at, the evidence, like the papers, the artifacts and all this kind of stuff. This is just how I'm navigating through it. You have a Western origin for a lot of this stuff, and that is controversial in itself. And I would never try and use the chronology to make an argument, because, as I said, the chronology is a bit all over the place, and without fully understanding the picture, I don't think one can actually use the chronology as a linchpin to hang an argument on, because you've got Isaac Newton, you've got Anatoly Fomenko, professors in mathematics who really struggle to grasp these chronological gaps. Now, so maybe one day I'll get there, but at the moment that's still something that's fermenting in the back of the mind. But it's not only the weaponry, geography, archaeology and etymology that's connecting all this stuff together. We have the genetic markers. And again, I've said in the past, I wouldn't hang an argument on the genetics, because for me, well, it's evidenced and it's pretty much fact that, DNA can change through exposure, as well as a plethora of other things, migrations of multiple cultures, conquests, where you have, unfortunately, back in the day, a lot of raping and pillaging. So that's seen a lot of replacement in admixture, from haplogroups to obviously you've got the Y and the paternal and the maternal, the male and the female lines. And a lot of them cases, it was the carrying off of women that after the conquest that led to a lot of admixture getting intermingled between societies. As I've outlined in the past, when you go back to around 1200 BCE, you actually see an influx from northwestern mainland Europe, from France up to, the coast of Scandinavia, pretty much, through Belgium, Holland. You see this influx of continental DNA come in to the eastern coast of England, which just ties in so beautifully with people like Imam Wilkins, who has put in his book in great detail that the Trojan War, as we've discussed as well, is in Cambridgeshire. Now, as I say, sorry, I'm a little bit all over the place here. I'm doing this so that like I can put pressure on myself. Really, I want to tell you this stuff, so then I have to get it done. You know, so you've got changing of DNA that has taken place all along the Mediterranean, from Britain and Ireland, south, and I can't wait to do this video, around the Canary Isles, back all the way across the Mediterranean, through the Berber tribes, all the way through to the Luwian culture that you see in Anatolia. Now, there's I think it's called the Lakkash. There was a Sea People's tribe called the Lakkash, or the, no, it wasn't the Lakkash. It was like, I'll put it on the screen just so right now. But there's all these different connection points with the etymological languages and place names. Sorry, I'm trying to use these headphones. I went out and bought these because the microphone that I was using was absolutely terrible. So sorry about it in the previous videos. I was hoping, because these connect via the Bluetooth, it'd be a lot easier. But I've got like tiny ears, so like they don't stay in very well. So we've got this, the genetic changes that take place all around the Aegean, and obviously the main marker is the R1 gene, and it is most prevalent in Western Europe, Britain, Ireland. You know, you could say back in the day Iberia, and Iberia is, it could be the key, it could be the link between Britain, and the Aegean. Obviously we know the Pillars of Hercules, and my mind's like a sieve, so I can't remember the name right now, but there was an old pre-Roman name for the Pillars of Hercules, which ties into a number of things as well. And it's all starting to come together. The only problem is you've got to prove these things. So I appreciate people having a bit of patience, and I say I am kind of learning on the job, but there's a lot of information here, and there's too much to even memorize. And I can't wait. Like I say, I'm going to do this video. Hopefully it should be out by Wednesday. I've just been booked onto a game of golf actually at the start of the week, so it might actually be pushed back towards the end of the week, maybe towards the weekend. And like I say, it's taking me so long at the minute because I really want to nail these videos. I don't want to do like pure hearsay. And there's a number of books that I've purchased as well recently that I really want to get into and read them as well, and sift through them. I mean, I never read a book in its entirety. The only books I've ever read in its entirety was like Dan Brown, you know, the Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons, and a couple of other novels like back in the day. These books are really intense because a number of people say similar things but come at it from a different way, and they're all trying to make different points. And I've come across a number of people who've got this opinion that the Trojan War was in the West. And what's fascinating is that they all have a different end game, if you will. They all start off with the notion that, yeah, the Trojan conflict was here, but by the time you get to the end, the stories are different, because everyone's got like their own perceptions and their own exposure to whatever information it is, and they all tie it in together kind of thing. But this kind of brings me to like what Marshall was discussing, you know, and I think she took a lot of her influences from, well, she'd probably openly admit this, from Lawrence Waddell, who she introduced me to, so thank you again, Marshall, for that. Where, you know, the strong Phoenician influence, but you also have a strong Trojan influence. So you could say you have the Trojans in Anatolia. Lawrence Waddell, he believed that the Trojan conflict was in Anatolia. Like I say, I'm in disagreement with this. But one of the reasons is because you find similar carvings and a lot of this other information, mazes. I'm going to do a really cool video on them, where you've got these connections in Anatolia and in Britain. So his logic is, because he went on consensus around the Trojan conflict, was, well, they must have migrated along with what people have spoke about in the British record of Brutus. So they must have migrated from the east to the west and brought this influence with them, this Trojan influence. However, you get all this Phoenician influence as well. That's to be found in Britain. That is over in the Levant, this region, not Troy, but like the Levant area, even though there is Phoenician influence in Troy as well, which again is a topic that a number of people I've seen who talk about this tend to overlook, these connections that go back let's say, like I said, I've seen a great interview on the Britain's Hidden History last week, through the week, with Caleb, who he's got a book out. I think I've put a link in a previous video to his book, where he believes the Trojan conflict, along with Wilson and Blackett, was around 650 BCE. Well, again, if the conflict took place in 650 BC, and then we start to see this expansion from that period, then we have to address what took place before that. And this is where the chronology actually comes in with a lot of people's perceptions, because if you don't move the timeline, then none of it makes sense for their arguments, because it physically can't. There's too many variables that you can't fit into the equation. There's too many loose objects that you've got nowhere to put them. So this is why I'm trying to stay clear of the whole argument really of the chronology just at this moment in time, because as I said earlier on, you've got to have a full-bodied view of the picture. And I'll be honest, some of these people are far smarter than I am. Spend far more time doing this, so maybe they're fully justified in their claims. However, to move everything from the east to the west does a massive disservice to what we find in the west. And for example, we touched on the DNA and the blood groups. If R1b, there's two main subclades that caught my attention when it came to the R1b, and that was R1b M269 or M269 and R1b M434 or 424, I think it was, one of them. Now, one is more Central Europe, the other is more Western Europe. The subclade, so the part of the R1b gene family, not to be conflated with R1a, and R1a seems to have took an easterly trajectory around the Caucasus regions, if you will, into Asia Minor, and you can see it. You can see that in places like Western Mesopotamia, say for example, Northern and Western Mesopotamia, even down actually through the Indus Valley into northwest India and around these regions, which is interesting that we get Dwarka on the west coast of India, not on the east coast of India. Obviously Dwarka was it's underwater now, but that was believed to be the ancient city of Krishna. Now, Krishna, I'm not going to go into it, but that's a lot of his philosophy ties into Western philosophy later down the line, or possibly at the period. Again, Druids, Western philosophy basically. And we do have the migration, as I say, around about 2000, 1500 BCE. We probably had multiple movements going from the region we know as Syria today, all the way to the west. And then this is the whole Hittite connection as well, where you get that R1b gene. But the subclades of R1b, 429, or I'm getting all over the place here, sorry guys. But these, and the headphones just keep slipping and falling out. Sorry, I pressed play there on the audio book I was listening to as well. So you've got all these different connections that link. I'll wrap this up because I'm all over the place and I'm really sorry, but like I say, a lot of this information, this is like the first time I've vocalized a lot of my thoughts here, so it is going to be a little bit all over the place. That's why stay tuned for the videos, because these next series of videos, the topics are broad. There's a lot of this information, and I know a number of people are researching this stuff themselves and have strong opinions on this stuff as well, which I found myself really at odds with quite a bit of it, which is fascinating. And it's nothing bad. Doesn't mean I'm going to be right or wrong. It's my opinion, and this is what I've come to understand over the past year or so, is that everyone has got their own opinions. You know, the old saying, opinions are like arseholes. Everyone has one. And there's probably some elements of truth in all these different opinions, and none of them are going to be 100% correct. Try as we might, none of us will be 100% correct. Wilson and Blackett, Iman Wilkins, Lawrence Waddell. You know, I've got all these books. I've got my phone stacked on all these books in front of me. And there's just so many different theories around the same topics. I think what I've tried to do in the last couple of months is take ideas, my ideas, take published papers, take the published books. Like I say, there's so many different fields that I've been looking at, from astrotheology to biblical scripture to genetics to archaeology to weaponry to metallurgy, you know, migrations, naval capacity, like what ships were people using at the time. I remember Ross, sorry, another segue, I can't help myself. I remember Ross discussing the reed boat and the potentiality of reed boats being used in the Odyssey by Odysseus, and potentially the Trojan conflict consisting of reed boats. Now, I can't say I subscribe to that, because one of the big things for me on that one was the horses. We know that the Troad was apparently rich in horses, as well as cattle, agriculture, oak trees, poplars, as Iman, I didn't even know what a poplar was. You know, you've got all these different things that you find in the location of Troy, but the vessels that the Achaeans, or the Danans, you know, the Argives, you know, the Myrmidons, Ajax's men, all these different fractions apparently must have brought their own horses with them, because they had chariots. And when you hear these, like, they have these chariots, they have all the equipment, all the men, the amount of men that are on these reed boats, I think, is it like 100 men per ship in the catalogue of ships? I find it hard that the reed boats would be to handle that, if I'm being honest. I have seen someone on Britain's Hidden History a long time ago, like pretty much when I first started coming across this stuff, excuse me, they provided a link, because I remember talking briefly about this, pardon me, and someone shared a link about these reed boats, and there was a man who built this boat and apparently sailed it. If I'm not mistaken, it did sink or it did start filling up with water pretty quick. And I do believe there was another chap who did something similar, and it did sail. Now, like I say, I'm not too confident in the Reed boat. And when it comes to the boat video, you know, I wish I could just beam what I wanted to do into a video, but unfortunately life's not that easy. But there's a number of wooden vessels that have been discovered that are Bronze Age. Now, you get certain types, you know, you get plank form, which would probably be the most logical type of vessel. You get more smaller boats that were designed using rope, as well as not planks, but different types of wood, like different panels and things like that. You get like the carving out of tree stumps, more like canoe type vessels. And obviously you've got like the old circular boats that you find, well, they were predominantly found in Wales as documented, excuse me, but they've been documented as being used all over the place. I do remember Llewellyn making a post, and when I looked into it a little bit more, obviously the Native Americans, when people came to this region where you had the Welsh speaking Native Americans, they were using these like conical, like circular boats. You know, the word Titians just popped in my mind there with the vision of the cake. Thank you, Ross, for giving me that. But imagine that upside down, you know, these small, like one man little boats that you use for navigating rivers and things like that. So out of all of these kind of things, the only one that would really make sense for having all the weight of your bronze armor, weapons, supplies, manpower, chariots, horses, for me to have all that weight, all these sharp objects and hooves and feet walking all over the deck of the vessel, it makes logical sense to me that it'd be some kind of plank form, at least a solid structure. So that's a video we need to discuss, because I have got a number of notes that I've documented over time, where the last few months, where I'd like to consolidate them into a video. But yeah, I think this video is probably it's half an hour long. So I apologise, this is again just a quick little update of what these next chain of videos are going to be. I hope people enjoyed the Wandleberry ones. We're not finished with Cambridgeshire as a whole. One of the fascinating things that we're going to look at is the weaponry. I know I've detailed a number of finds in that last Wandleberry video, from urns, spearheads, arrowheads, swords, daggers. Because another segue, sorry, one of the interesting things to discuss on the weaponry is, sorry, press play again, turn into a nightmare this, sorry, is the leaf-shaped weapons. Now, the leaf-shaped swords, the oldest leaf-shaped swords that I'm aware of were found around the Caucasus regions, you know, north of Macedonia, you know, in around that region of, could say, Eastern Europe, Eastern Central Europe. Now, I think that we know that the cradle of civilization after the flood was most definitely this region. It has to be, because all the arrows point there, unless our history is so false that like all history is literally being picked up and transported here. But then that's kind of what the history tells us anyway, because if you watch the Do We Van Do We Vac video, you know, where we find that the Ark was allegedly built, according to these records, in Britain. The flood came, the ship settled on Ararat, which ties into a video that I really want to do as well regarding Ron Wyatt and his finds of what he believed was the Ark on Mount Ararat. I don't think it was Mount Ararat itself. I think it's an adjacent mountain. So we know that, like I said, I think we know that this is the region where civilization restarted, was a reset, if you will. Whether you want to believe that God in the Bible sent the flood, whether you want to believe that, Enki, is it Enki or Enlil, is it the Enuma Elish, where they discuss the flooding and the resetting of humanity in the Mesopotamian ideology. We know that the haplogroups, the blood, as I say, we see this diversion, one going east, one coming back west of the R1, which is the predominant blood group that we find across Indo-Europe. And like I say, it changes over time, so you get all these subclades and these different variations. And then, it's like when it comes to coding, you can have a 0 and a 1, but then if you go 0, 1, that's one code. Then you can go 0, 1, 1, that's one code. Or you can go 0, 1, 0, and then you can go 0, 0, 1, 0. And this is how it works. I believe I had a good discussion with someone about a year or so ago about this. Another segue. I believe this is how everything operates in essence. Because if you go and look at the periodic table, if you go and look at the stacking of the isotopes, if you were to put it into numbers, I think it whittles down to basically 2 electrons. Now, I'd really like to make a video on this as well. At some reason, I don't know how this has happened, but I've got kind of tied into just doing history videos, but I'm about so much more than history. Like there's a lot to discuss because it all interconnects and it's all part of the same story.
Imagine electrons, the tiny particles that make up everything around us. They are not just randomly scattered, they have an order, a pattern. This is the core idea behind the binary electron stacking theory, or BEST. BEST is a new way of understanding how electrons behave. It suggests that electrons can stack on top of each other. Like coins in a pile, these stacks can grow or shrink. This simple idea has profound implications for science. Understanding how electrons stack can revolutionize our understanding of the universe. From the smallest atom to the largest star, BEST offers a new lens to view the cosmos. In BEST, electrons are like coins with 2 sides. We call these sides 0 and 1. When electrons stack, they form binary sequences. For instance, a stack could be 001 or 1010. These binary sequences aren't just random, they dictate how electrons interact. The specific arrangement of 0 and 1 determines how much energy an electron has. Mathematics helps us describe these stacks. By using binary mathematics, we can predict how the stacks will behave. This predictive power is a key strength of BEST. Light or photons play a crucial role in BEST. When a photon hits an electron stack, it can transfer its energy. This can cause an electron to jump to a higher energy level within the stack. Think of it like a ball hitting a stack of coins. The ball's energy can make some coins jump higher. Similarly, photons excite electrons to higher energy states. This interaction between photons and stacked electrons is fundamental. It is the basis for many phenomena, including the emission of light from stars and the creation of new elements. Section 4. Creating new elements. The role of stacked electrons. Isotopes are atoms of the same element with different numbers of neutrons. They play a crucial role in various fields, from medicine to nuclear energy. BEST suggests that electron stacking plays a role in isotope formation. When an electron absorbs enough energy, it can influence the nucleus of an atom. This can lead to the capture or emission of a neutron, creating an isotope. This new perspective on isotope formation could revolutionize nuclear physics. It offers a novel way to understand and potentially control nuclear reactions. Section 5. Building materials with stacked electrons. The way electrons stack also affects the properties of materials. Different stacking patterns lead to different phases of matter. For example, the arrangement of electrons in a diamond is different from that in graphite, even though both are made of carbon. Imagine building blocks with different shapes. You can create different structures depending on how you arrange them. Similarly, electron stacks determine the properties of materials. This understanding could lead to the development of new materials with tailored properties. From superconductors to ultra-strong materials, the possibilities are endless.
I've got a lot of this stuff in notes that I'm actually going to put into a book, and I've actually got like a pretty solid, probably about 15-20 pages already written on this, where we discuss like something called nucleophilic substitution and the rapid fossilization, which can tie into how we do have issues with the chronology because things can be inaccurately dated. But that's a different story for a different day. It's to do with electrons, the flow of electrons, usually water, mud, these kind of things, running over some kind of organic matter. That creates a patina on the outside to protect the nucleus of the organic matter that was there, which can lead to rapid fossilization. However, in terms of the dipoles and the electrons, if you put them together, if you put two electrons together, you get something called a dipole. Now, this is being presented by someone called Roger Spare. The guy is out there. I'm not going to lie, he is out there. He's talking about giants. He's talking about dragons. One of my first videos that got a bit of success on this kind of topic. I think it's had about 10,000 views, something like that. Last time I checked, he's got like the dragon and the giant fish in North Africa, North and Northwest Africa, that runs all along from Morocco basically to Egypt. Well, he discusses this kind of stuff, and he's done published papers and published work, and I read one of his papers on there. That's where I got the nucleophilic substitution from, and he put my attention to this the stacking of the electrons. Now, I actually had a few conversations with Roger about this, and I actually disagreed on quite a lot of stuff with him and his research, but he shows, and he has, anyone wants to go and see it, go to his channel and you'll be able to find it, where they use a laser pen, and it's like a red laser, it's like Cherenkov radiation, and it's called the double slit experiment. So what you do is you're firing the photons at this slit, usually between, say, like two poles. So you'll have two objects, two nails if you wanted, and then you shine the light at the center. Now what happens is it gets forced into a smaller gap, and as it gets forced into a smaller gap, you actually see light increase in speed. Just as if you were to shine a laser pen through water, you'll see light slow down because it's got a thicker medium than the ambient medium, of which, in my eyes, God created the light for. So you have this light, the beams of light, the photons getting forced into this slit, and it actually rips apart what we'd see on a dipole, which is the light and dark elements of the particle. Some would say that's matter, antimatter, but the point is that when we have this white and dark elements of the dipole, that for me is we're seeing the first phase of the stacking of the 1 and 2, or the 0 and 1, however you want to look at it. I'm not a binary code expert, but if you were to start looking at the periodic table and isotopes, there's so many isotopes in between the fixed elements. So what is that? For me, that is the 0, 1, 0, 1, 1. 010 That's when we start to see the change of the stacking. And it's almost like the way everything has magnetism and creates its own magnetic field and stuff like that. It's almost like it's an innate code. Like when a child is born, or when a tree grows, why do they all stick to a pattern? Where did that come from? It's because its essence, if you will, it has its own code. And this is where I start to think about like the simulation theory. Whoa, another segue. Must be like the 30th one in this video. But when you start looking at the coding, and maybe this is where the theory for the matrix actually came from. You know, once you start to see this stacking, then you realize everything is coding, because everything does have its own essence and its own code. And right, we're getting way off topic now. We're getting so far away from what I want to talk about. So I'm going to leave it there before we start going into astrotheology and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so we've got a good few videos. I think one here must be smaller than the other, by the way, because this one keeps falling out. So we've got a series of videos that are going to be coming out. This will probably take us for the next few months. Maybe do like 4 or 5 videos, hopefully. And like I say, they're taking a little bit longer because I really want them to be solid and extensive. And I want to cross-reference everything before I discuss it, because I feel like I've got that much material. I could probably do a video a day for the next 6 months. I really could. And like I said, that's why the book's it's getting expanded out into 3 books. And I haven't even had the time to sit down and go through and edit book 1 yet. I've got the material. It's like I say, it's a structuring issue, and how am I going to lay it all out? Like I say, I haven't even got the full picture yet. It's all still developing in my own mind. And we live in a society, I guess, you know, like where we all want things now. We want it quicker. So again, pardon me, I thank and I appreciate everyone who is patient, who is being part of this journey with me, who is on their own journey and is just interested in this stuff as well, because it really is a fascinating topic. Well, topics, you know, who are we, where did we come from, and all this kind of stuff. But more specifically, the past few months and this, I don't know, this element, this period of time where I've been really focusing on the historical side of things, and you know, the Trojan conflict was my linchpin, and the solar worship, because that was something that Callum mentioned in his interview as well. And I will be doing a video, hopefully, where I do have a chat with Peter and Adam in the near future. So God knows where that conversation could go. And he mentioned, well, do you know what? I'm not going to go there. I'm going to leave it there. I was going to start going into the solar worship and Apollo and all this kind of stuff, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. That's coming down the pipeline really soon. So again, thank you very much. I hope you all enjoyed this long ass waffle from me in its many different directions that it travelled off to. And yeah, stay in touch, because the next video is going to be, I'm gonna lay out the geography of these movements at the period of around 1200 BC, and that's going to be the initial video, and then like the players involved and stuff like that. And then as we move forward, I will start tightening the screw, because there's a lot of cool details and information that are really gonna, you know, it won't be for everyone, because as I say, everyone's got their own ideas. But this is where my research has taken me, and the more I look into it, the more papers I read and stuff like that, the more it makes sense. So I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for stopping by, and hopefully I'll catch you in that next video. Peace.